The Carpathian Mountains rose like jagged teeth against the bruised twilight sky, their peaks shrouded in mist that seemed to breathe with ancient malevolence. Elena Vasile urged her horse forward along the narrow mountain path, her gloved hands tight on the reins, her heart steady with purpose. 24 years of life had led to this moment. 24 years of training, of prayers whispered in candlelit chapels, of learning to see darkness for what it truly was. She had come to end a curse that had plagued these lands for centuries. She had come to kill Count Dracula. The wind carried whispers through the pines, voices that might have been the dead, or merely the mountain's cruel tricks. Elena paid them no mind. She had been raised by the Order of the Sacred Dawn, an ancient brotherhood of vampire hunters who had tracked the undead across Europe for generations. Her father had been among them, a man whose face she barely remembered, but whose death she would never forget. The stories said Dracula's servants had torn him apart in a village square while he tried to protect a family of farmers. Elena had been 6 years old, hidden in a root cellar, listening to her father's screams fade into silence. The memory fueled her now, burning brighter than any torch. She wore a long leather coat reinforced with silver thread, blessed by 3 different priests in 3 different languages. Beneath it, an arsenal of weapons pressed against her body like a second skin. Stakes of ash wood, vials of holy water, a silver crucifix that had belonged to her mother, daggers etched with prayers in Latin. She was a living weapon, forged by grief and sharpened by faith. As the sun blared its last light across the horizon, Castle Dracula emerged from the mist ahead. It stood on a precipice of black rock, a gothic nightmare of crumbling towers and shadowed battlements. Gargoyles leered from every corner, their stone faces twisted in eternal agony. The windows were dark save for a few that glowed with a sickly amber light, like infected wounds in the castle's flesh. Ravens circled the highest tower, their cries harsh and mocking. Elena dismounted at the edge of the forest, tying her horse to a gnarled oak. The animal whinnied nervously, eyes rolling white with fear. She stroked its muzzle once, a brief gesture of comfort, then turned toward the castle. The path ahead was overgrown with thorns and dead flowers, their petals black as ash. The very air tasted of decay and something sweeter, more insidious. Corruption, temptation, the scent of a predator's lair. The castle gates stood open, a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Elena paused at the threshold, drawing a deep breath. She pressed her palm against the crucifix beneath her coat, feeling its sharp edges bite into her skin. Then she stepped inside. The courtyard was a graveyard of forgotten grandeur. Statues of weeping angels stood among weeds, their faces eroded by centuries of rain. A fountain sat dry and cracked at the center, its basin filled with dead leaves and the bones of small animals. The castle doors beyond were massive things of black oak and iron, carved with scenes of battles and blood sacrifices. They opened at her approach with a groan that echoed through the courtyard like a death rattle. Elena entered, her boots clicking on marble floors veined with red like dried blood. The entrance hall stretched before her, impossibly vast, lit by chandeliers thick with cobwebs and guttering candles. Portraits lined the walls, aristocrats in ancient finery staring down with hollow eyes. At the far end, a grand staircase swept upward into shadow, its red carpet faded to the color of old wounds. She was not alone. Elena felt the presence before she saw it, a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. Shadows moved at the edges of her vision, too quick and fluid to be natural. Then came the voice, cultured and ancient, speaking from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome, Hunter. I have been expecting you." Elena's hand went to the stake at her belt. She turned slowly, scanning the hall. Nothing, just shadows and silence and the smell of dust and old blood. "Show yourself, monster. I did not come here to play games." A laugh echoed through the hall, soft and tinged with something that might have been sadness. "Patience, child. You have traveled far. Surely you can spare a moment for civility. After all, it has been so very long since I had a visitor with such fire in her eyes." Movement on the staircase. A figure descended with inhuman grace, each step deliberate and soundless. Count Dracula materialized from the shadows like a nightmare taking flesh. He was tall, his frame lean but powerful beneath a black coat that seemed woven from darkness itself. His hair fell to his shoulders, dark as a raven's wing, framing a face of terrible beauty. High cheekbones, a proud nose, lips that might have smiled kindly once but now held only ancient sorrow, and his eyes. God help her, his eyes. They burned crimson in the candlelight, twin fires that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. He reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped, regarding her with an intensity that made Eleanor's breath catch. For a long moment, neither spoke. The vampire's gaze swept over her, taking in every detail, and something shifted in his expression. The predatory amusement faded, replaced by something Elena could not name: recognition, wonder, anguish. Dracula took a step forward, then stopped as if struck. His hand rose slowly, trembling, reaching toward her face, though 10 paces still separated them. When he spoke again, his voice was a broken whisper. "Ilona." Elena's grip tightened on her stake. "That is not my name. I am Elena Vasile of the Order of the Sacred Dawn. I have come to end your reign of terror, demon. Prepare yourself." But Dracula did not move to attack. He simply stared, those crimson eyes boring into her with such intensity that Elena felt something stir deep in her chest, a fluttering she could not explain. The vampire's face had gone pale, paler even than death, and for the first time since entering the castle, Elena felt afraid. Not of violence, of something far more dangerous. "Your face," the vampire whispered. "Your eyes. The way you stand, so defiant, so certain of your righteousness. 4 centuries I have waited. 400 years of darkness and damnation, and now you return to me. Ilona. My Ilona." "I do not know anyone by that name," Elena said, but her voice wavered. There was something in the way he looked at her, something that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "I am here to destroy you, nothing more." Dracula closed his eyes, a shudder running through his frame. When he opened them again, they glistened with something that could not possibly be tears. Yet it was. "You do not remember," he said softly. "Of course you would not. Death takes so much from us, even when we return. But I remember everything, Ilona. Every moment, every word you spoke to me, the way you looked at me not with hatred or fear, but with compassion. You saw the man I had been, buried beneath the monster I had become. You alone believed I could be saved." Elena shook her head, backing toward the door. "You are trying to confuse me, to weaken my resolve with lies and manipulation. I know what you are. Vampire. I know the evil you have wrought." "Do you?" Dracula's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Do you know why I became this creature? Do you know the man I was before the curse? His name was Vlad, a prince, a warrior, a fool who thought he could bargain with darkness to save his people from invasion. But darkness takes everything and gives nothing but eternal hunger. I have walked this earth for 600 years, Elena. 600 years of killing, of drinking life from the innocent, of watching everyone I ever loved crumble to dust. Until you—" "Stop," Elena commanded, but her hand had loosened on the stake. There was something in his words, in the raw pain of his voice, that resonated with a part of her she did not understand. "You came to this castle 400 years ago," Dracula continued, taking another slow step toward her. "Not as a hunter, but as a healer. A woman from the village who had heard tales of the monster in the castle and came anyway, because you believed even monsters deserved mercy. You brought me bread and wine, though I could consume neither. You spoke to me of God and redemption, of the possibility that even the damned might find grace. And slowly, over months and years, you taught me to feel again, to hope again. You called me Vlad, not Dracula. You saw the man, not the beast." Elena's back pressed against the door. Her breath came fast and shallow. "This cannot be true." "I loved you, Ilona," the vampire said. And now he stood directly before her, close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his body. "I loved you more than I loved my own soul. You were the light in my darkness, the only good thing in centuries of damnation. And when the hunters came, when they discovered you visited me, when they accused you of witchcraft and dragged you away, I tried to save you. I slaughtered a dozen men to reach you, but I was too late. You died in my arms, your blood soaking into the earth, and with your last breath you made me a promise. You said you would find me again. That love does not end with death, that you would return." Eleanor's hands shook. Her weapons felt heavy, foreign, wrong. She looked up into those ancient, tortured eyes and felt something crack open inside her chest, a feeling she had no name for, a longing that made no sense. "I do not know you," she whispered, but the words felt like a lie even as she spoke them. Dracula reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and touched her face with fingers cold as marble. The moment his skin met hers, Elena gasped. Images flooded her mind, vivid and overwhelming. A different life, a different world. She saw herself, but not herself, wearing simple peasant clothes, walking up this same path with a basket of bread. She saw Dracula younger, more human, sitting by a fire, and watching her with eyes that held wonder instead of hunger. She heard her own voice speaking words she had never said. "You are not beyond saving, Vlad. No one is beyond saving." The vision shattered. Elena stumbled back, breaking contact, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What did you do to me?" "Nothing," Dracula said, lowering his hand. His voice was thick with emotion. "The soul remembers what the mind forgets. You felt it, did you not? The truth of what we were, what we are." "No," Elena said, but her conviction wavered. "This is a trick, a vampire's glamour. You are trying to seduce me, to make me lower my guard so you can kill me. If I wished you dead, child, you would already be dead." Dracula's eyes flashed with something dark and terrible, a reminder of the predator beneath the tortured soul. "But I do not wish you dead. I wish you to remember. I wish you to understand, and most of all, I wish for you to give me what you gave me 400 years ago. A chance. One chance to prove that even monsters can change." Elena's mind raced. Every instinct she had been trained to follow screamed at her to drive the stake through his heart, to fulfill her mission and avenge her father. But something else, something deeper and more primal, held her back. She thought of the vision, of the warmth in those crimson eyes when they looked at her as Ilona. She thought of the tears on the vampire's face, real and devastating. Could a monster cry? Could a demon love? "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think, to understand what is happening to me." Dracula nodded slowly. "Then, take all the time you need. The castle is yours to explore. There is a chamber prepared for you in the east wing. You will find food, water, fresh clothes. You are my guest. Elena, not my prisoner. And when you are ready, we will speak again. I will tell you everything. The truth of what I am, what I have done, and what you meant to me in that other life." He turned and walked back toward the stairs, his coat billowing behind him like shadows given form. At the base of the staircase he paused and looked back at her. "One more thing," he said quietly. "Your father, the man who died in the village. I did not kill him. My servants acted without my command, driven by hunger I failed to control. I offer no excuses, only the truth. His death weighs on my conscience, one more sin in an ocean of sins. If you choose to destroy me for it, I will understand. Perhaps I will even welcome it." Then he was gone, ascending the stairs and disappearing into the shadows above, leaving Elena alone in the vast entrance hall with her weapons, her faith, and a terrible, impossible question burning in her heart. What if the monster was right? What if she had loved him once, and God help her, what if some part of her still did? Elena did not sleep that night. She could not. The chamber Dracula had prepared for her was a study in Gothic elegance, all dark wood and crimson velvet, with a canopied bed that looked soft enough to swallow her whole. A fire burned in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on walls hung with tapestries depicting scenes of medieval courtly life. A silver tray sat on a carved table, laden with bread, cheese, dried fruits, and a carafe of wine that smelled of spices and autumn. She touched none of it. Instead, she paced the room like a caged wolf, her mind churning with questions that had no answers. The vision she had experienced when Dracula touched her face replayed endlessly in her thoughts, each detail sharp and undeniable. The warmth of sunlight on her skin, the weight of a bread basket in her hands, The sound of a voice, her voice but not her voice, speaking with such tenderness to a creature who should have inspired only revulsion. Elena moved to the window and looked out over the darkened landscape. The moon hung full and enormous in the sky, painting the Carpathian forests in shades of silver and shadow. Somewhere in the distance wolves howled, their voices rising and falling in an eerie chorus. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried to remember who she was. Elena Vasile, hunter, warrior of the sacred dawn, daughter of a murdered man. She had come here with one purpose, and that purpose had not changed. Yet her hand had loosened on the stake, her conviction had wavered, and worst of all, when Dracula had looked at her with those ancient, tortured eyes, something inside her had responded, not with hatred, with recognition. A soft knock at the door made her spin around, hand flying to the dagger at her belt. The door opened slowly, and an elderly woman entered, her back bent with age, her grey hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore a black dress that rustled as she moved, and her eyes, though rheumy with years, held a sharpness that suggested she missed nothing. "Forgive the intrusion, miss," the woman said, her accent thick with the mountains. "I am Magda. I have served this castle for more years than I care to count. The master asked me to see to your comfort." Elena regarded her warily. "You serve the vampire willingly?" Magda's weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. "Willingly is a complicated word. I serve him because I am bound to serve him, bound by oaths older than your grandmother's grandmother. But I have never known him to be cruel without cause. The master is many things, child, but he is not the simple monster your order would have you believe." Elena bristled. "He has killed thousands, drained innocent people of their blood, spread his curse across Europe like a plague." "Yes," Magda said calmly, moving to the fire and adding another log. She worked with the ease of long practice, her movements steady despite her age. "He has done all these things. But do you know why he came to this castle 600 years ago? Do you know what drove him here, to this forsaken peak, far from the cities and villages where prey would be plentiful?" Elena said nothing. The old woman straightened, wiping her hands on her apron, and fixed Elena with a penetrating stare. "Shame," Magda said quietly. "After he was cursed, after he became what he is, Prince Vlad Dracula killed without thought or mercy. He was a beast, driven only by hunger and rage at what he had lost. But slowly, over decades, the man began to resurface beneath the monster, and when he realized the horror of what he had done, the lives he had taken, he fled to this place. He imprisoned himself here, in this castle at the edge of the world, to limit the damage he could do. He feeds, yes, he must feed or die the true death, but he takes only what he needs, and only from those who come seeking him out. Bandits, mercenaries, men whose souls are already dark." "That is a convenient excuse," Elena said coldly. "A predator justifying his predation." Magda shrugged. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it is a damned soul doing what little good he can in a world that offers him no redemption. You are young, child. You see things in absolutes, good and evil, light and dark. But I have lived long enough to know that most souls exist in the grey spaces between, even immortal ones." The old woman moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. "He loved her, you know. Ilona. I was here when she came, a slip of a girl with more courage than sense. She brought him bread and spoke to him of mercy, and slowly, like ice melting in spring, his frozen heart began to thaw. I saw them together, in the garden that grows in the castle's heart. She would read to him from the Bible, and he would listen as if her words were the only light in his darkness. And when she died, when those righteous fools from the church burned her at the stake for the sin of showing compassion to a monster, I saw him weep. For 3 days and 3 nights he wept, the first tears he had shed in 400 years. Elena's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you wear her face," Magda said simply. "Because I am old and have seen too much death, and I believe that some loves are strong enough to transcend even death itself. Because I want you to understand what you face here, not a simple monster to be slain, but a soul trapped between damnation and grace, seeking redemption it can never earn. What you do with that knowledge is your choice, but at least make it an informed choice." The old woman left, closing the door softly behind her. Elena stood alone in the chamber, the fire crackling, her mind a storm of confusion and doubt. She moved to the bed and sat on its edge, head in her hands. Everything she had been taught, everything she believed, told her that vampires were irredeemable, soulless creatures who wore human faces like masks. Yet Dracula had wept. He had loved. And some part of her, some deep and terrifying part, believed him when he said she had loved him in return. Sleep finally claimed her in the hours before dawn, a fitful rest plagued by dreams. She walked through a garden thick with roses, their petals white as snow. A man sat on a stone bench, his face in shadow, and when he looked up she saw Dracula, as he must have been centuries ago. Human, warm, alive. He smiled at her, and the smile was so full of gentle affection that her heart ached. "You came back to me," he said in the dream. "I knew you would. You promised." Elena woke with tears on her face and the phantom sensation of his hand in hers. Sunlight streamed through the window, bright and merciless. She rose quickly, splashing cold water from a basin onto her face, trying to wash away the lingering warmth of the dream. But it clung to her like perfume, sweet and intoxicating and deeply wrong. She dressed in her hunting clothes, checking each weapon methodically. Stake, holy water, silver daggers, crucifix. The familiar ritual steadied her, reminded her of her purpose. She was a hunter. She had a mission. Whatever games the vampire was playing, whatever emotions he stirred in her, they did not change the fundamental truth. He was a monster. She was here to destroy him. Elena left the chamber and began to explore the castle. In daylight it was no less imposing, but somehow less oppressive. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight that pierced the gloom. She walked through vast halls filled with ancient furnishings, libraries with walls of books in languages both familiar and strange, galleries where paintings depicted battles and coronations, and scenes of courtly romance. Everything spoke of wealth and power and a world long dead. In one corridor she found portraits of the Dracula lineage, men in armor and furs, women in elaborate gowns, children with solemn faces. At the end of the row hung a portrait that made her stop cold. It showed a young woman with dark hair and gentle eyes, wearing a simple dress of midnight blue. The face was Elena's face, not similar, identical. Beneath the portrait, a brass plate bore a single name, Ilona. Elena reached out with trembling fingers and touched the painted canvas. The woman in the portrait seemed to look back at her with infinite sadness, as if she knew what was to come, as if she had seen her own death and accepted it. Elena's breath came fast and shallow. This was not possible. Reincarnation was a heresy, a belief condemned by the Church. Yet here was proof, undeniable and terrifying. "You see now," Dracula's voice said from behind her. Elena whirled, hand flying to her stake, but the vampire made no move to approach. He stood in shadow at the far end of the corridor, his form barely visible in the dim light. He wore different clothes today, a simple white shirt and black trousers, and somehow the lack of his usual Gothic finery made him seem more human, more vulnerable. "I had that painted from memory," he continued quietly, 50 years after she died. I was afraid I would forget her face, the exact curve of her smile, the way her eyes caught the light. So I hired an artist and described her until he captured her perfectly, and now you stand before it, and it is like looking at a ghost made flesh. Elena's voice was hoarse. "How is this possible? How can I be her?" "I do not know," Dracula admitted. "I do not pretend to understand the mechanisms of death and rebirth. But I know what I see. I know what I feel. You are Ilona returned to me, whether by God's will or some other force I cannot name, and I believe you feel it too, though you fight against it. The pull between us, the recognition." "What I feel," Elena said through gritted teeth, "is confusion, anger, fear. You have turned my world upside down, vampire. Everything I believed, everything I was trained to know, you have called into question with your words and your tears and your impossible claims." "Then ask me questions," Dracula said, stepping forward into a shaft of sunlight. Elena gasped. The light touched his skin, and he did not burn. did not blister or smoke or recoil in agony. He simply stood there, pale and beautiful, and utterly still, letting the sun illuminate him. "Another myth," he said softly. "Sunlight does not destroy us, though it weakens us, makes us sluggish and dull. I can walk in daylight, Elena, though I prefer the darkness. I am not the demon of legend, all-powerful and invincible. I am simply a man cursed with unnatural life and unnatural hunger, flawed, broken, but still in some small way a man." Elena's mind reeled. If sunlight did not kill him, what did? How could he be destroyed? But before she could ask, Dracula spoke again. "Come with me. There is something I wish to show you, a place that will help you understand." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but curiosity and something deeper, something that whispered in Ilona's voice, urged her forward. She followed the vampire through winding corridors and down spiral stairs, deeper into the castle's heart. They passed through a great hall where the remains of a feast lay mouldering on a table, as if the diners had simply vanished mid-meal. They walked through a chapel where the crucifix above the altar had been turned upside down, and Elena shuddered at the blasphemy. Finally, they emerged into a courtyard open to the sky, and Elena stopped, her breath catching in wonder. It was a garden, impossible and beautiful, thriving in the midst of this place of death. Roses climbed the walls in profusion, their blooms a riot of crimson and white and palest pink. Fruit trees grew in neat rows, heavy with apples and pears. Herbs perfumed the air with scents of lavender and rosemary and thyme. At the center stood a fountain, water splashing merrily into its basin, and around it grew a carpet of wildflowers in every color imaginable. "This is where we spent our time together," Dracula said softly. "Ilona and I. She planted these roses, nurtured them with her own hands. She said that if beauty could grow in a place of darkness, then perhaps hope could as well. After she died, I tended this garden myself. For 400 years, I have kept it alive. My penance, my memorial, my faith that she would return." Elena walked slowly through the garden, trailing her fingers over rose petals soft as silk. The beauty of it hurt, a physical ache in her chest. She could almost see it, the young woman she had been kneeling in the soil, laughing as she worked. And beside her, the vampire, watching with eyes that held something other than hunger, devotion, love. She turned to face Dracula, and for the first time since entering the castle, she allowed herself to truly look at him. Not as a monster to be slain, but as a being with his own history, his own pain. His face was weary, etched with centuries of sorrow. His crimson eyes, which should have been cold and predatory, held depths of feeling that made her heart clench. "Tell me everything," she said. "Tell me how you became this. Tell me about Ilona. Tell me why I should believe that a creature who has killed so many deserves redemption." Dracula inclined his head slowly. "Then sit with me, and I will tell you a story. A true story, though it reads like a nightmare. The story of a man who tried to save his people and damned himself instead. The story of a love that offered salvation and the forces that tore it away. And perhaps at the end, you will understand why I have waited 400 years for your return." They sat together on the stone bench by the fountain, surrounded by roses and the soft music of falling water, and the vampire began to speak. His voice was low and heavy with memory, each word carrying the weight of centuries. And Elena listened, her weapons forgotten, her mission momentarily set aside, as the truth of his damnation unfolded like the petals of a dark and terrible flower. The sun climbed higher in the sky as Dracula spoke, and Elena watched the light move across the garden like a living thing, illuminating first the roses, then the fruit trees, then finally the fountain where water caught the rays and transformed them into diamonds. But her attention never wavered from the vampire's face, from the pain that flickered across his features like shadows of old ghosts. "I was born Vlad, third son of Vlad Dracul, in the year of our Lord 1431. Dracula's voice was soft, almost hypnotic. "My father was voivode of Wallachia, a principality caught between the Ottoman Empire and the Christian kingdoms of Europe. We were pawns in a game of empires, always one wrong move from annihilation. When I was 11 years old, my father sent me and my younger brother Radu to the Ottoman court as hostages. insurance against his good behavior. We spent 6 years there, learning their language, their customs, their ways of war, and their cruelty. Elena saw his hands clench on his knees, the knuckles going white even through his pale skin. She remained silent, sensing that interruption would shatter whatever fragile trust was building between them. When I finally returned home, I was 17, and my father was dead, murdered by rivals who wanted our throne. I fought for years to reclaim what was mine, to protect my people from the Ottomans who would have enslaved them all. I was ruthless. I impaled my enemies on stakes and lined the roads with their bodies as warnings. They called me Vlad the Impaler, and they were right to fear me. But everything I did, every brutality, every act of violence, I did to keep my people safe. Or so I told myself. He rose from the bench and walked to the fountain, staring into the water as if he could see his past reflected there. Elena watched the line of his shoulders, the way he held himself with a warrior's bearing even after all these centuries. The war went on for years. We won battles and lost them. We held the Ottomans at bay through sheer savagery and determination. But it was never enough. They kept coming wave after wave, and I knew that eventually we would fall. My people would be slaughtered or enslaved. Everything I had fought for would turn to ash. I was desperate, Elena, desperate and young and so very foolish. "What did you do?" Elena asked quietly. "I sought power," Dracula said, turning to face her, "the kind of power that could turn the tide of war. I had heard legends, whispers of ancient magic, of beings who walked between life and death and could not be killed by mortal means. Vampires, the Strigoi, creatures of nightmare. And I found a witch in the deepest part of the forest, an old woman who claimed she could give me the strength of 100 men, the speed of the wind, the immortality of the gods themselves, all for a price. And you paid it," Elena said. "I paid it gladly, thinking I was saving my kingdom." Dracula's laugh was bitter as poison. "The ritual took 3 nights. She drained my blood and replaced it with something else, something dark and cold that burned through my veins like liquid night. She spoke words in a language that hurt to hear, and when it was finished, when I rose from that ritual circle, I was no longer human. I was strong, faster than any man, nearly invulnerable to weapons and so hungry. God, the hunger was like nothing I had ever known. It consumed me, drove out every thought, every feeling, until all that remained was need." He closed his eyes, and Elena saw his throat work as he swallowed. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "The first person I killed was the witch herself. I tore out her throat and drank until there was nothing left but a dried husk. Then I killed the guards I had brought with me. Then everyone in the village where we had performed the ritual. Men, women, children. I killed them all and felt nothing but satisfaction. For 3 years, I was a beast in human form. I did fight the Ottomans, yes, and I won every battle. But the cost was unconscionable. I slaughtered entire armies, drank the blood of thousands, and when my own people began to fear me more than they feared the enemy, I knew I had become the very monster I had sworn to protect them from." "What changed?" Elena asked. "How did you go from that to this, to someone capable of love?" "Time," Dracula said simply. "Terrible, endless time. The man inside the beast never truly died, you see. He was buried, suffocated by hunger and rage, but still there. And slowly, century by century, he began to claw his way back to the surface. I would have moments of clarity, brief windows where I remembered who I had been, what I had wanted to be. And in those moments, the guilt was overwhelming. I had committed atrocities in the name of salvation. I had become a plague upon the earth. So I fled to this castle, to this mountain at the edge of the world, and I tried to limit the damage I could do." He returned to the bench and sat heavily, as if the weight of his memories had exhausted him. "For 200 years I lived in isolation. I fed when I had to, taking only the worst of men, the killers and rapists and brigands who came seeking treasure in the cursed castle. I read. I studied. I tried to understand what I had become, and whether there was any way to undo it. And I found nothing. No cure. No redemption, only eternal hunger and eternal guilt. I was beginning to think I should walk into the sun and end it all when she came, when Ilona came. "Tell me about her," Elena said, and was surprised by how much she wanted to know, needed to know. Dracula's face softened, the harsh lines easing into something almost peaceful. She was 23 when she first climbed this mountain, a healer from the village below, trained by the local wise woman in the arts of medicine and midwifery. She had heard the stories about the monster in the castle, and instead of fear she felt pity. She brought bread and wine, thinking I was a hermit who had lost his way. When she saw what I truly was, when I showed her my nature, I expected her to run screaming. But she did not run. She looked at me with those dark eyes, so full of compassion it hurt, and she said, "Even monsters deserve kindness." Elena felt something twist in her chest, a recognition so deep it seemed to come from her bones. She could almost hear those words in her own voice, could almost feel the weight of a breadbasket in her hands. She came back, Dracula continued, week after week, month after month. At first I think she came out of duty, out of some sense that no creature should be left alone and unloved. But over time, it became something else. We would sit in this garden and talk for hours. She told me about her life, her dreams, her faith in a God who loved even the most broken of his creations. And I told her things I had never told anyone, my fears, my regrets, the man I had been before the curse. She listened without judgment, and slowly, impossibly, I began to feel again, not just hunger, not just guilt, but joy, hope, love. "How long were you together?" Elena asked. 5 years, Dracula said. 5 years of peace such as I had never known. She never let me bite her, never offered herself as prey. What we had was not about blood or hunger. It was about two souls finding solace in each other. She made me want to be better, to find some way to atone for my sins. She researched ancient texts, consulted with scholars, trying to find a way to break the curse. And I began to believe it might be possible, that love might be strong enough to redeem even me. "What happened?" Elena whispered, though she already knew the answer. Magda had told her. "The church happened," Dracula said, and his voice went hard as stone. A traveling priest came to the village and heard that a young woman had been visiting the castle. He declared her a witch, a servant of Satan, corrupted by the vampire's influence. They arrested her while she was in the market. They gave her no trial, no chance to defend herself. They dragged her to the village square, tied her to a stake, and set the fire. I was in the castle when it happened. I felt her terror through some bond I did not understand, felt her pain as the flames consumed her. By the time I reached the village, it was too late. She was already gone. He fell silent, and Elena saw his hands shaking. When he spoke again, tears tracked down his pale cheeks, glistening like diamonds in the sunlight. I held her body in my arms, and I wept. I wept as I had not wept since I was a child. And with her last breath she looked at me and smiled. She said, "I will find you again, Vlad. Love does not end with death. Wait for me." And then she was gone, and I was alone again in the darkness. I destroyed the village that night. Every man who had participated in her execution, I killed. It brought me no peace. Nothing could bring me peace. So I came back here, to this castle, and I waited. 400 years, Elena. 400 years of hoping that she was right, that love could transcend death, that somehow, some way she would return to me. Elena sat frozen, tears streaming down her own face, though she did not remember starting to cry. The story was too much, too real, too devastating. She thought of the vision she had experienced, the warmth and certainty of that other life. She thought of the portrait in the corridor, the woman with her face who had loved a monster and died for it. And she thought of the pull she felt toward this creature, this damned and sorrowful being who had waited centuries for a love that should have been impossible. "I do not know if I am her," Elena said, her voice breaking. "I do not know if reincarnation is real, or if this is all some elaborate deception, but I feel something when I look at you, Dracula. Something I should not feel, something that terrifies me." "I know," Dracula said gently. "Believe me, I know. You came here to kill me, and instead you find yourself drawn to me. It is not fair. It is not right. I do not blame you if you choose to walk away, to return to your order and forget this ever happened. Elena shook her head. I cannot walk away. Not now. Not until I understand what this means. What I am meant to do. Then stay, Dracula said. Stay and let me show you that I am not the monster you were taught to fear. I have done terrible things, yes. I do not deny my sins. But I have also tried, in my own broken way, to be more than my curse. I have saved lives as well as taken them. I have protected villages from bandits, healed the sick with knowledge gathered over centuries, preserved art and literature that would otherwise have been lost. I am not good, Elena, but I am not purely evil either. I am simply a man trying to find redemption in a world that offers none to creatures like me. Elena stood, her legs unsteady, and walked to the roses. She plucked a single white bloom and held it to her face, breathing in its perfume. The scent was sweet and pure, a small miracle growing in the midst of darkness, just like Ilona had said, just like she had believed. I need time, Elena said finally. Time to think, to pray, to understand what my heart is telling me. Take all the time you need, Dracula said. I have waited 400 years, I can wait a little longer. He rose and walked toward the castle doors, then paused and looked back at her. One more thing, Elena. The stake at your belt, the holy water, the silver blades, any of them could kill me. I am not invulnerable. If you decide that I am too dangerous to live, that the world would be better without me, I will not fight you. I will let you end this curse and finally give me the peace I have sought for so long. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in the garden with the roses and the fountain, and a choice that would damn her soul or save it. She sank to her knees among the wildflowers and prayed, begging God for guidance, for clarity, for some sign that would tell her what to do. But the only answer was the wind moving through the garden and the soft scent of roses. And the impossible, terrible knowledge that the monster in the castle had once been a man, and might be a man still, and that she, against all reason, against all training, against everything she believed, was beginning to love him. 3 days passed in a strange suspension of time, and Elena found herself caught between two worlds. By day she explored the castle, discovering its secrets room by room. She found Dracula's library, a vast chamber lined floor to ceiling with books in dozens of languages, texts on philosophy and medicine and history spanning centuries. She found his study, where maps of ancient kingdoms lay unfurled on tables, annotated in a precise hand that recorded the rise and fall of empires. She found chambers filled with art, sculptures and paintings collected over lifetimes, each piece a fragment of beauty preserved against the erosion of time. And everywhere she went, she found evidence of the man beneath the monster. Letters written but never sent, apologies to people long dead, journals chronicling his struggle with the hunger, his attempts to find meaning in an existence defined by death. A small room filled with children's toys, carved from wood with painstaking care, that he had made for village children he would never meet. Each discovery chipped away at the certainty she had carried with her up the mountain, replacing it with something far more complicated and painful. By night, she sat with Dracula in the garden or the library and they talked. He told her stories of the world he had seen, of Constantinople before it fell, of the Renaissance in Florence, of revolutions and plagues, and the endless march of human history. She told him of her life, of growing up in the Order, of the training that had shaped her into a weapon against the darkness. And slowly, carefully, they began to know each other, not as hunter and prey, but as two souls seeking understanding in a world that offered none. On the third night, as they sat by the fire in the library with rain drumming against the windows, Elena finally voiced the question that had been building inside her since their conversation in the garden. If you truly want redemption, why do you still feed? Why not simply refuse the hunger and let yourself die? Dracula looked up from the book he had been reading, his crimson eyes reflecting the firelight. Because I am a coward, he said simply. I have been a coward for 600 years. The hunger is not something I can simply ignore, Elena. It is woven into every fiber of my being. When I go too long without blood, the beast inside me grows stronger, begins to take control. I become the creature I was in those first years after the curse, mindless and savage. I feed not because I want to, but because the alternative is to become a true monster, one who kills indiscriminately without even the pretense of choice. But you choose your victims, Elena said. You said you only take those who deserve death. And who am I to make that judgment? Dracula's voice was heavy with self-loathing. Who gave me the right to decide who lives and who dies? I tell myself that I only kill murderers and rapists, men whose souls are already damned. But the truth is, I kill because I must, and I justify it however I can so that I might sleep during the day without going mad from guilt. I am not the hero of this story, Elena. I am the villain trying desperately to convince himself he is something more. Elena stared into the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker. She thought of her father, of the man who had died because Dracula could not control his servants. She thought of all the lives lost over centuries, all the blood spilled in the name of survival. And yet she also thought of the garden, of the beauty preserved in a place of darkness, of the book saved, the knowledge protected, of a creature who wept for the woman he loved and waited 400 years for her return. What if there was another way? She asked quietly. What if you did not have to kill to survive? Dracula laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you think I have not searched for alternatives? I have tried animal blood. It sustains me for a time, but eventually the hunger grows too strong, and I need human blood or I go mad. I have tried to starve myself, to simply refuse to feed. I lasted 6 weeks before the beast took over completely. When I woke from that fugue state, I was in a village 20 miles away, surrounded by corpses. I do not even remember killing them. That is what happens when I try to deny what I am. What about willing donors? Elena pressed. People who give their blood freely, knowing what you are? And who would do such a thing? Who would willingly offer themselves to a vampire? Dracula shook his head. Even if such a person existed, even if I could feed without killing, it would not change what I am. I would still be a creature sustained by the life of others. I would still be damned. Maybe, Elena said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. Or maybe damnation is not as permanent as you believe. Maybe redemption is possible, even for you, if you are willing to fight for it. Dracula set down his book and looked at her intently. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that you stop hiding in this castle, that you use your power for something other than mere survival. You have knowledge, strength, abilities that could save lives instead of taking them. You could protect villages from true monsters, from bandits and wolves and disease. You could be what you were meant to be before the curse, a protector, a prince who serves his people. And the blood I would need, the hunger that will never go away. I would give it to you, Elena said, and the words left her mouth before she fully realized what she was offering. Not enough to kill me, not enough to turn me into what you are, but enough to sustain you, freely given with full knowledge and consent, and in return you would swear an oath to use your power only to protect the innocent, to never again take a life unless there is no other choice. The silence that followed was absolute. Dracula stared at her as if she had offered him the sun itself. His hands trembled, and when he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse with emotion. You would do that? You would trust me with your blood, your life, after everything I have done? I would, Elena said, and realized that it was true. Somewhere in the past 3 days, her fear had transformed into something else. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of love. The recognition of a kindred soul trapped in circumstances beyond his control, seeking desperately for a way out. I believe you can change, Dracula. I believe that the man who created that garden, who wept for Ilona, who has fought against his nature for centuries, deserves a chance at redemption. And I believe that maybe, just maybe, that is why I was brought here. Not to kill you, but to save you. Dracula rose from his chair and crossed to where she sat, then dropped to his knees before her. He took her hands in his, and his touch was cold but gentle, reverent even. Elena, he whispered, if you do this, if you truly offer me this gift, I swear to you on whatever remains of my soul that I will honor it. I will be the man you believe I can be. I will protect instead of prey. I will use my curse as a weapon against true evil, and I will spend every moment of my existence trying to be worthy of your faith in me. Elena looked down at him, at this ancient creature kneeling before her like a supplicant, and felt something shift in her chest. The pull she had felt since their first meeting crystallized into certainty. This was why she had come. Not to destroy, but to redeem. Not to end a curse, but to transform it. "Then it is decided," she said softly. "Tomorrow night we will seal this pact, and together we will find out if even the damned can be saved." Dracula pressed his forehead to her hands, and she felt the cool moisture of his tears against her skin. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me hope when I had none left." They sat together in the firelight, hunter and vampire, mortal and immortal, bound by a promise that would either redeem them both or destroy them. And outside the storm raged against the castle walls, but inside there was warmth and the fragile beginning of something that might in time become salvation. The next evening, Elena prepared herself with the solemnity of a warrior going into battle. She bathed in water scented with herbs, dressed in a simple white gown that Magda had provided, and prayed for nearly an hour in the small chapel within the castle. She did not pray for protection or for the strength to kill. She prayed for wisdom, for the courage to walk a path no hunter had ever walked before, for the grace to transform darkness into light. When the sun set and the castle filled with shadow, she made her way to the garden. Dracula waited by the fountain dressed in black, his face solemn and beautiful in the moonlight. He had laid out a blanket on the grass, and on it sat a silver goblet and a small knife with a jeweled handle. "Are you certain?" he asked as she approached. "Once this is done, there is no going back. You will be bound to me, and I to you. Your blood will carry my mark, and other vampires will know that you are under my protection. Some will see that as a challenge." "I am certain," Elena said, sitting on the blanket across from him. "I have prayed, and I have thought, and I believe this is right. Not easy, not safe, but right." Dracula nodded slowly. "Then we do this properly with honor and ritual, not as predator and prey, but as equals entering a covenant." He picked up the knife and held it over his palm. "First I offer my vow. I, Vlad Dracula, swear upon my blood and my honor that I will use my power only to protect the innocent and punish the wicked, that I will take no life without cause, that I will honor your sacrifice and strive every day to be worthy of your faith in me." He drew the blade across his palm, and black blood welled from the cut, dripping into the goblet. The scent of it was strange, metallic and ancient, like the smell of a tomb opened after centuries. He handed the knife to Elena, and she took it with steady hands. "I, Elena Vasile, swear upon my blood and my soul that I will help you find redemption, that I will give you what you need to survive freely and without coercion, that I will stand beside you as you face whatever comes, be it the judgment of mortals or the wrath of God himself." She pressed the blade to her palm and drew it across, gasping at the sharp pain. Her blood flowed bright and red, impossibly vivid next to Dracula's darkness, and dripped into the goblet to mingle with his. The two bloods swirled together, red and black becoming one. Dracula lifted the goblet and drank deeply, his eyes closing as Elena's blood touched his lips. When he lowered it, his expression was one of profound reverence. "Your blood tastes of life," he whispered, "of sunlight and hope and everything I lost so long ago. I will treasure this gift, Elena. I will honor it with every breath I take." He offered her the goblet, and she hesitated only a moment before drinking. The taste was strange, cold and bitter, but not unpleasant, and as it slid down her throat she felt a warmth spread through her body, a connection forming, invisible but undeniable, linking her to the creature before her. She could feel his emotions suddenly, the overwhelming gratitude and hope and fear that he would fail her, disappoint her, prove unworthy of this chance at redemption. Then Dracula took her wounded hand in his and brought it to his lips. Elena tensed, expecting pain, but his bite was surprisingly gentle. His fangs pierced her skin with surgical precision, and she felt the pull as he drank. Not much, just enough. And with each swallow the connection between them grew stronger until she could feel his heartbeat, slow and ancient, syncing with her own. When he released her hand, the wound was already closing, sealed by some property of his saliva. He licked the last drops of blood from his lips and looked at her with eyes that glowed like embers. "It is done," he said. "You have saved me, Elena. Now I must prove myself worthy of salvation." Elena felt dizzy. Whether from blood loss or the enormity of what she had just done, she could not say. But when Dracula reached out to steady her, she did not pull away. She let him support her, let him lift her carefully and carry her back to the castle, and for the first time since arriving at this cursed place she felt no fear, only the certainty that her path, however strange and dangerous, was the right one. And in the days that followed, as Dracula began to venture beyond the castle walls for the first time in decades, as he used his power to drive away bandits threatening a village and healed a child dying of fever with knowledge gathered over centuries, Elena watched and knew that redemption was possible, that love could indeed transform even the darkest curse into something resembling grace. But she also knew that their greatest test was yet to come, for the Order would not understand, the Church would not forgive, and when they learned what she had done, they would come for both of them with fire and steel and righteous fury. The question was whether the bond between them would be strong enough to survive the storm. For 3 weeks, Elena and Dracula lived in a strange and fragile peace. By day, she trained in the castle courtyard, maintaining the skills that had been drilled into her since childhood, while he slept in a chamber deep beneath the earth where no sunlight could reach. By night, they ventured into the surrounding villages together, and Elena watched in wonder as the monster she had been sent to kill transformed into something resembling a guardian. He saved a farmer's daughter from drowning in a swollen river, moving with impossible speed to pluck her from the water before the current could claim her. He tracked down a pack of wolves that had been terrorizing livestock and drove them deeper into the mountains where they could hunt without threatening human life. He sat at the bedside of a dying woman and held her hand as she passed, easing her fear with gentle words in a dozen languages, until she went peacefully into whatever waited beyond. And twice a week, in the privacy of the garden beneath the moon, Elena gave him her blood. The ritual never lost its strange intimacy, the moment when his fangs pierced her skin and she felt his hunger satisfied, his gratitude washing over her through the bond they shared. She grew stronger through it somehow, as if his ancient power flowed back into her with each feeding. Sharpening her senses and quickening her reflexes, they were changing each other, mortal and immortal becoming something neither had been before. But Elena knew it could not last. The Order would have noticed her absence by now. They would have sent scouts to investigate, and eventually they would come for her, certain that she had either died or been corrupted by the very evil she had been sent to destroy. She tried not to think about it, tried to live in each moment as if it might be their last piece, but the knowledge hung over her like a blade waiting to fall. It fell on a moonless night in late autumn. Elena woke to the sound of horses and shouting, the clash of steel on steel echoing through the castle halls. She leapt from her bed, already reaching for her weapons before her mind fully caught up with her body. The castle was under attack. She dressed in seconds, strapping on her hunting gear with practiced efficiency, and ran toward the commotion. She found Dracula in the great hall, surrounded by 24 men in the black leather armor of the Order of the Sacred Dawn. They had driven him back against the far wall, their crossbows loaded with bolts of ash wood, their blades coated in holy water. Leading them was a man Elena recognized immediately, and her heart sank. Father Constantine, the Grand Master of the Order, the man who had trained her father, and who had overseen her own education in the art of killing vampires. He was tall and iron-haired, his face lined with the scars of 100 battles, his eyes burning with the fervor of absolute certainty. When he saw Elena emerge from the corridor, those eyes widened with a mixture of relief and horror. "Elena!" he called out, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Thank God you are alive. Come here, child. Come away from that abomination. We will protect you." Elena's hand went to the crucifix at her throat, the one her mother had given her, and she felt the weight of the choice before her. She could go to them now. She could claim she had been gathering intelligence, playing a long game to get close to the vampire. They might even believe her. She could return to the Order, to the only family she had ever known, and pretend that these past weeks had been nothing more than a necessary deception. But that would be a lie, and she had learned, in the garden beneath the moon, in the quiet conversations by the fire, in the moment when she had offered her blood freely, that some truths were worth more than safety. She walked forward slowly, but instead of going to Father Constantine, she positioned herself between the hunters and Dracula. The Grand Master's face went white with shock. "Elena, what are you doing? Step aside. We have come to end this creature's reign of terror." "His reign of terror ended centuries ago," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "What remains is a man trying to atone for his sins, a soul seeking redemption, and I will not let you kill him." The silence that followed was absolute. The hunters stared at her as if she had grown a second head. Father Constantine's expression shifted from shock to something darker, more terrible. Disappointment, betrayal, rage. "He has corrupted you," the Grand Master said, his voice shaking. "Twisted your mind with his dark gifts. This is why we hunt them, Elena. This is why they must all be destroyed. They seduce the righteous, turn good souls to evil. You are one of our finest. Your father would weep to see what you have become." "My father would want me to seek truth," Elena shot back, anger rising hot in her chest. "He taught me to think, to question, to look beyond the easy answers. Yes, Dracula has killed. Yes, he is cursed. But he is also trying to change. In the past 3 weeks, he has saved more lives than you know. He has protected villages, healed the sick, driven away bandits. He is using his power for good. He drinks blood," Father Constantine spat. "He is an abomination against God. There is no redemption for the undead. The Church is clear on this. They have no souls. They cannot be saved." "Then the Church is wrong," Elena said, and the words felt like breaking chains. She had carried the weight of doctrine her entire life, never questioning, never doubting. But now, standing between the man she had come to care for and the organization that wanted him dead, she finally understood that faith and dogma were not the same thing. "I have seen his soul, Father Constantine. I have felt his remorse, his desire to be better, and I will not condemn him simply because your ancient texts say I must." Behind her, she heard Dracula's sharp intake of breath. Through their bond, she felt his emotions, a tangle of love and fear and desperate hope. He had not expected her to defend him, had not believed anyone would choose him over the certainty of holy righteousness. Father Constantine's hand went to the sword at his belt. "Then you have chosen damnation, child, and I cannot let you leave here alive. You know our secrets, you know our methods. If you have truly been corrupted, you are a threat to everything we have built. I am sorry, Elena, I truly am, but this ends now." He drew his blade and the hunters raised their crossbows. Elena felt time slow to a crawl, felt her training take over even as her heart screamed in protest. She could fight them. Between her skills and Dracula's power, they might even win. But these were men she had trained with, eaten with, prayed with. They were not evil. They were simply doing what they believed was right, following orders and doctrine that had guided them for generations. "Wait," Dracula's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Do not harm them, Elena. I will not have you damn yourself to save me." He stepped around her, placing himself between Elena and the hunters. His hands were raised, empty, non-threatening. His face was calm, resigned even, as he addressed Father Constantine. "You are right, Grandmaster, I am a monster. I have killed thousands over the centuries. No amount of good deeds can wash away that blood. If my death will give you peace, if it will protect Elena from your wrath, then I offer myself willingly. Take my head, drive a stake through my heart. End this curse and let me finally rest." "No," Elena cried out, grabbing his arm. "No, you cannot. We have a pact. We are trying to change things." "And we have succeeded," Dracula said gently, turning to look at her. His crimson eyes were soft with an emotion she had never expected to see there. Peace. "You have given me 3 weeks of hope, Elena. 3 weeks of being something other than a monster. You have shown me that redemption is possible, even if I do not live to achieve it. That is enough. That is more than I ever dared dream." He cupped her face in his cold hands, and Elena felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Through their bond, she felt everything he felt, the love that had grown between them, deeper and more powerful than anything she had imagined, the gratitude for being seen as a person, not a beast, the terrible sorrow of knowing it was ending, and beneath it all the hope that perhaps his sacrifice might save her, might let her return to the life she had known before. "I love you," he whispered, speaking the words for the first time. "I loved you as Ilona, and I love you as Elena. In this life and whatever comes after. Remember that. Remember that even monsters can love, and that love is never wasted." He kissed her forehead once, a benediction and a farewell, then turned back to the hunters. "I am ready," he said. "Do what you came to do." Father Constantine raised his sword, and Elena saw the hunters' fingers tighten on their crossbow triggers. Time seemed to stop. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think, her world narrowing to this single moment where everything she had fought for, everything she believed, was about to be ripped away. And then she remembered Ilona, the woman she had been 400 years ago, who had stood before these same kind of men and refused to renounce her love for a creature the world called damned, who had burned for her compassion, her refusal to see evil where she saw only suffering. Ilona had promised to return to find him again, and here Elena stood 4 centuries later at the same crossroads. She could let him die. She could watch them destroy him and return to the Order, carrying his memory like a wound that would never heal. Or she could choose him, choose love over doctrine, choose compassion over certainty, choose the possibility of redemption over the safety of condemnation. The choice, when it came, was not difficult at all. Elena moved with the speed Dracula's blood had given her, faster than human reflexes could track. She drew the silver dagger from her belt and pressed it to her own throat, the blessed blade biting into her skin hard enough to draw blood. The hunters froze, crossbows still aimed, but fingers easing off triggers. "If you kill him," Elena said, her voice ringing through the hall like a bell, "you will have to kill me as well. Not because I am corrupted or controlled, but because I choose him freely. Because I have seen what you cannot see. That redemption is not about deserving it or earning it through righteousness. It is about grace, about second chances, about believing that no soul is beyond saving if they truly wish to change." Father Constantine's face was a mask of anguish. "Elena, please, do not do this. You are throwing your life away for a creature that cannot be saved. You taught me that faith means believing in things we cannot prove," Elena said. "That hope means seeing light, even in the darkest places." "Well, I have faith in him, Father Constantine. I have hope that he can be more than his curse, and if that makes me a heretic, if that damns my soul, then so be it. I would rather be damned with him than saved without him." She felt Dracula's shock through their bond, his desperate love, and his terror for what she was risking. But she also felt something else. Strength. The courage to hope that perhaps this time the story would end differently. That perhaps love really could be stronger than death, stronger than dogma, stronger even than the curse that bound him. Father Constantine lowered his sword slowly. His face was aged beyond his years, lined with grief and confusion. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the Grand Master spoke, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I cannot kill you, Elena. You are like a daughter to me. Your father was my brother in arms, and I swore to protect you. But I cannot let this stand either. You have made your choice, and it breaks my heart. The Order will declare you anathema. Your name will be struck from our records. If we meet again, we will be enemies." "I understand," Elena said quietly, lowering the dagger but not sheathing it. "And I am sorry for the pain this causes you, but I cannot live a lie. I cannot pretend I do not see what I see, feel what I feel." "Then go," Father Constantine said, turning away as if he could not bear to look at her. "Take your vampire and leave this place. Go far from here, where the Order's reach does not extend. And pray, Elena. Pray that you are right about him, because if you are wrong, it will cost you your soul." The hunters backed toward the doors, their weapons still drawn, but their resolve clearly shaken. They had come expecting a simple hunt, a righteous kill. They had not expected to find one of their own standing in defense of the monster. As they filed out, Elena saw pity and anger and confusion on their faces. She saw judgment and contempt and, in a few, a flicker of something that might have been understanding. When the last of them had gone and the sound of their horses faded into the night, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. She turned to Dracula and found him staring at her with an expression of such profound wonder that it hurt to see. "You chose me," he whispered. "You chose me over everything you have ever known. Why? Why would you do that?" "Because you were right," Elena said, crossing to him and taking his cold hands in hers. "Love does not end with death, and I do love you, Vlad, not because I am Ilona reborn, though perhaps I am, but because I am Elena, and I see you for what you are, broken, cursed, trying desperately to be better, and that is worth fighting for, worth dying for if it comes to that." Dracula pulled her into his arms, and Elena felt him shaking against her. "I do not deserve you," he said against her hair. "I do not deserve this chance, but I swear to you, on whatever remains of my soul, I will spend eternity trying to be worthy of it." They stood together in the empty hall, mortal and immortal, hunter and vampire, bound by a love that had transcended death and time and the judgment of the righteous. Outside, dawn was breaking over the Carpathian mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. A new day, a new beginning. Magda found them there as the sun climbed higher, still holding each other as if afraid to let go. The old woman's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. "So it is done," she said softly. "The curse is not broken, but perhaps it is transformed. Love has its victory after all." "What do we do now?" Elena asked. "We cannot stay here. The Order knows where we are." "Then we go," Dracula said, a new strength in his voice. "We find a place far from here, where we can build something new. I have castles across Europe, properties in lands the Order does not reach. We will go there, and I will continue what we started, protecting instead of praying, saving instead of damning. And you, my Elena, my Ilona returned, you will be at my side, not as my victim or my servant, but as my equal, my partner, my salvation. And my damnation," Elena said with a sad smile. "But perhaps damnation shared is better than salvation alone." They left the castle that very night, taking only what they could carry. As they descended the mountain path, Elena looked back once at the Gothic fortress silhouetted against the stars. She thought of the life she was leaving behind, the certainty and righteousness of the Order, the simple clarity of good versus evil. It would have been easier to stay in that world, to see things in black and white, to kill monsters without question or doubt. But she had learned that the world was not so simple, that monsters could love and heroes could be cruel, that redemption was possible even for the damned, if someone was willing to believe in them. And as Dracula took her hand and led her down the mountain toward whatever future awaited them, Elena knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice, the choice to see beyond the curse to the man within, the choice to offer grace instead of judgment, the choice to believe that love, however impossible, however forbidden, was always worth the risk. They walked into the night together, leaving behind everything they had been, embracing everything they might become. And though their path would be difficult, though they would face judgment and persecution and the constant struggle against his curse, they would face it together, mortal and immortal, light and shadow. Two halves of a whole that had been seeking each other across the centuries, finally reunited and refusing to be torn apart again. In the village below, the church bells rang for morning prayers, their sound carrying clear and pure through the mountain air. Elena listened and smiled. Even in defiance of the church, even walking beside a vampire, she felt closer to God than she ever had before. Because she had learned that faith was not about following rules or condemning sinners, it was about love, about mercy, about seeing the divine spark in even the most unlikely souls. And if that was heresy, then she would be a heretic gladly. For in the end, love was the only salvation any of them truly needed. The story of the hunter and the vampire did not end there, of course. It continued for years, for decades, for as long as Elena drew breath and beyond. They became legends in their own right, the woman who gave up heaven for a monster, and the monster who fought every day to deserve her sacrifice. Some said they were saints, others called them demons, but those who truly knew them, the villages they protected and the innocents they saved, understood the truth. That redemption is not about being perfect. It is about trying. and that love, real love, can transform even the darkest curse into something resembling grace. Not salvation, perhaps, not in the way the Church would recognize, but something just as powerful, just as eternal. Hope.